And I had a dream here a while back. I don't really know if I feel that led to share it, but I could. I'll see. But what was so interesting about that dream was, I think every little tidbit of what was going on was in the dream. Every little tidbit of what's been going on was in the dream, even though I didn't know what the things are. And the thing that's really stirring me is there's so many things that seem so disconnected in our lives. And we see some of the connections of how they go together. But in God's net, actually, they're putting everything is working together for some purpose and plan. And I don't know why that's stirring so much in me right now, but it has been. But it just seems to be coming to another place of that there are so many things that we see have no connection in our lives and don't even seem to have anything to do with God as we foresee it, but really are all working. There's a whole bunch of things all in motion, all together, and some things seem to be totally maybe just family life, just the doings of every day, all these things, but they're all part of processes that are running all at the same time. And God's got so many things running all simultaneously, and they're so interconnected. And I think maybe that's part of just picking up on the indications and those type things. I don't know why, but that's one thing that's really been pressing on me lately, that the Lord's been showing us how much everything's so interconnected that we don't realize.
So if we take these things that are so interconnected, and we really put a value on them, and we'll see where the opportunities of God are in them. Because I was listening to, I haven't heard Graham Cook. I've not really gone to any of his YouTube stuff, although I really like him. Anyway, I did yesterday for some reason, and I know why, because I got to keep good things out of it. But one of the things he was saying is we really, if you look at it, you take what you just said, so we don't really have a frustration problem, we have a patience problem. He said, instead of looking at something as frustrating us, let's say, God, where are you teaching me patience? Or what are you teaching me out of this? And this is where we're all at. It's such a different way of looking at things. We've got God's perspective, and when we totally hone in on God's perspective, that's what it looks like. That God doesn't waste anything, and nothing really is happenstance. So it's all somehow interconnected, even though we don't always understand, or even in the midst of sometimes of that, we get that frustration, and we don't have the understanding. See, God, I need understanding, and all of that. So it's just a different perspective of looking at things. The other thing he said too was, sometimes we feel like we don't have anything to say, but he said, or any way to minister. And he said, my goodness, where have you overcome? What has God done in your life? There's where your testimony is. And he says, that's what we minister out of. We minister out of our testimony. That's where your authority is. He said, have you overcome cancer? He says, cancer can't stand in your way. He says, that's where you minister out of. What have we overcome in our lives? What has God done to change us? Where are you more in his image and likeness? There's where your testimony is, and that's where we speak out of. And that's because that's where we have the authority. That's something that's just truly solid in us. And we've been saying this for quite a while, the power of our testimony. And we just don't give testimonies enough. Well, you don't have to say, well, that God did this and this and this for me. That's just how you are. That's just how you speak. My brother-in-law is another good example of that. How God just totally took him out of that situation that he was in. He had the brain tumor. God just miraculously healed him. Not only that, but I don't know if you guys know this, and I think I've shared it before, but he was almost 400 pounds at that time in his life. And he had and you've got to know that he was raised in a godly home. Lester Summerall was his spiritual father, He did lose his father in a plane accident when he was 16 years old, 15 or 16. But he just was so influenced by his dad, and his dad was a godly man. In fact, his dad died in a plane accident as he was coming back from South Bend doing a telethon for Lester Summerall. And so he and the men that were with him in this small plane, they crashed on their landing coming back into Indianapolis. But so he's met a lot of godly men and had that kind of an upbringing. But he backslid in his life, and he gained lots and lots of weight in the midst of that, and just turned his back on God and went out and did his own thing, and failure after failure after failure. And then he ended up having this brain tumor, and God just really got a hold of his life then. And as he was laying on the bed, and you know, the prognosis was just absolutely not good. And he had a mother who was a praying mother, you know, and it was just really just a woman just full of faith. And he pulled through all of that, and he told God on his bed before he went into the operation, and he said, God, if you get me out of this, he said, I will never stop telling of what you've done and your greatness. And he hasn't, all of these years. And that's what he does. It's his testimony that always opens up an area to speak. Because he'll just go up to total strangers and just begin to talk about things God's done in his life. And I just stand there and watch him, and there he is, and with another stranger, you know. And I know I've shared this with you guys before, but I'm telling you that testimony is your open door of what God has done in your life. That's your open door, and that's where you carry authority. And that's how he has been able to lay hands on a multitude of people. He has seen cancers, just his doctor's husband, his doctor, family doctor is a woman, and her husband, and it's a young couple, and her husband was dying, still stage 4, some type of cancer. I tell you that he prayed for him, and it was just gone, and God just healed him. So, you know, he's seeing these miracles. That's where your miracles are. And when we put our faith in action, that's part of the message of last night. When we begin to put our faith in action, that's where you're going to see the miracles. We aren't going to see miracles in stagnation. So, y'all know what I'm talking about. But I just wanted to share that with you about the power of the testimony. We've got plenty of what God has done in our lives, and there's always open doors. And we just have to find that way to go in and not be fearful about it. Just go in.
I was just kind of connecting things that we've been talking so far this morning. And it kind of comes back to when we've been told several times now not to devalue the small things. And what I'm really seeing in all this, it's being intentional in them small little things that we don't even really see how it's going to make a difference in somebody's life at all. It really wouldn't even matter if I pray with that person. Does it really even matter if I tell them about this? But those are the very things that I'm seeing as we're even talking this morning. And I've seen the Lord showed me that before. But that's our faith in action. As we're doing those little things, and they may not be what we even see as being ministering this divine nature, because we think we're going to see this spectacular versus this hidden thing that's going in the background that we can't see any difference when we do it. We don't see that instant fruit or that instant manifestation of something. We say a prayer, and we may feel the presence, we may not even feel the presence as we're speaking. We may not even feel that flow. But what I really see in all this is we need to be a lot more intentional in adding our faith, which is putting our faith in action, that even if we don't see I don't know what we're going to call it a result, maybe that is the right word, I don't know. But we don't see a difference when we pray, it doesn't really matter. It's God has got all this in motions, and if we will take in his patience, we will see these things starting to...
It's just good. Look, that word intentional just jumped out at me, because the last year God really spoke this thing about the intent of his heart. Being as how we're children, we should be having the intent within us too. We should be this thing of intentional things that we do in our life should be intentional. We should be intent of doing his intent.
If God's priority is for us to be conformed in his image, it could very well be just a word spoken to someone which will help them change more into his nature and his image. You talked about someone, was it last week, Lonnie, you were talking about running into someone up at the festival. You know, just speaking a simple word to them may shift something within them. I mean, we don't know. It may just be that thing that's just going to hit that bullseye. It may be that arrow that just goes right in. And it maybe it was just the one thing that they needed, just like tithe, you know. God spoke to you, you know, and it became a firm revelation within you. And so what is the Lord always doing with us? And we've talked about this before, and I'll bring it back up because I think it ties in with what you're saying. He is always encouraging us and edifying us into our identity, which is rooted in His image. And so we ourselves are to be doing that to others. Because here's the deal. We're so used to seeing with our eyes and judging with our eyes, and God's getting us more and more out of that not to do that. But we need to see people, because you see people here, but you know this is the place we're always supposed to be encouraging people into. And that's the other thing Graham Cook was hitting on yesterday. And I mentioned this last spring, but God, one of the things that I could see the yuck in myself, which was one thing, but God doesn't focus on that, you guys. He does not focus on that in our lives. He focuses on His image and what He's spoken over your lives. He's always saying, okay, you're going through this right here. Now, I'm glad you see this, but now this is where we're going. And so He'll always speak that to us. And so you've reached a point where God's now speaking some deeper revelation and getting you more into that place He's called us to be in. So it's always getting others into their identity, which is rooted in His image. So that makes sense. So that's what we're saying to people.
And along with the intentional thing should be the realization everything is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at, because a lot of things come along, it's like things you don't even want to approach or do this or that. But if we would change the whole thinking to say this is an opportunity instead of a thing to fear or whatever, then it would change our whole perspective on what we're doing and how we're going about the whole thing, knowing that God's involved in it. So it becomes an opportunity.
Think about how God works in our lives. It ain't suddenly, and there are sometimes some major life changes, but how much of what God does in our lives is just so small. It's just a small little shift. It's just a small little shift. It's a small little shift. So I think what I'm seeing here too is that sometimes we're looking for a bigger shift than what God's looking for. God has got the patience we talked about to see the big things. So He's only concerned about making this little shift because He knows how big a shift it really is.
Right.
Because it's setting you up for the next shift. And we don't have that. I want to keep adding the word long-suffering in there. We don't have that willingness to bear the time it takes for those shifts to all happen. We just want to see a result. But God is that long-suffering. He sees our destiny. So He's willing to just take a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. And isn't He long-suffering with us? How much grace doesn't He give us in mercy when we fall on our face again, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. We see that, but then He picks us up and say, no, you can do this. No, you can do this. No, you can do this. And He always just says, no, just do this. Just do this.
These little changes which He makes, they're all orchestrated. And that's why overall the entire situation shifts. But if we make a little shift in our own strength, all we can do is move something over here a little bit, but immediately it collides with something else which we have no control over, and we are back to square one. And so that's why he's making these little shifts everywhere. In all of our lives. And so they all merge together. And so something resides which we absolutely cannot fathom, which is completely out of our hands to do.
It's like Steve was saying, what we say or what we do may seem so small, but if you think about the perspective, maybe that added along with what another brother or sister is doing in the background, you're not even aware of, what they're speaking or doing that's being added to that,
Yes.
and that added to that by another one, then all of a sudden those little things bring about a real thing of shifting,
Yes.
And we just look at it as that little thing that we said or done, it couldn't be anything worth anything.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's just the way God is. He sees everything in the big picture, using people in a big way, a body, rather than just individually looking at the one person. It's that thing coming into agreement and working together, it's a body, and just put out there what you got, what you can do. And let somebody else add to it, and water it and grow it.
And I think that's
Go ahead.
That's the deeper reason for the sort of instruction or exhortation he gives us in Ephesians, which has been with me lately very strongly, where he said, giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, of course, that's our duty to do that because he's the giver of all things, so we give thanks. But it's essentially for our own benefit, because as we do that, we bring our awareness always back to him. And we see him involved in every little thing we do, because he is. I mean, without his grace, every moment we wouldn't be able to do anything. Let's face it. I mean, I've been in that situation where I noticed the lack of grace, and it's just pitiful. I mean, how I see my own, what I thought were my abilities just crumble and dissolve into nothing. And so as we bring our attention constantly to his grace, to his presence, by giving thanks to him in all things, then that becomes a powerful, how should I say, a transformation occurs in our own outlook and in our own relationship. And then he truly becomes present everywhere. And then he can enter, I think, in more manifest ways. Because if he did it right now, his manifest presence was there, I would probably be overwhelmed. I don't think I would be very functional. And that's not what he has in mind. He wants his presence to be, and give us with even greater power to act, not ourselves to be falling apart because there's so much unredeemed stuff inside. So we prepare ourselves for that manifest presence by just bringing him in consciously in every little thing we do. And I think that's really the deeper meaning of this passage.
Well, the biggest thing I find on the Thanksgiving, I really think this is the key, because it's interesting how God has you do something for him, but it's really something for you.
Yes.
And what I really see with the Thanksgiving thing is, because God has had me dealing with this hidden little thing of pride that you never even realize is pride, but it's just such a little thing that wants to sprout up and grow. And what I really find the key of Thanksgiving is keeps that sprout from ever sprouting. And the reason I say that, I've been really pressing against this thing lately. And it's like the resistance to the thanks that I'm giving. I don't know how else to explain it the way this thing has been lately. It's like a resistance to giving thanks. And what I really find that Thanksgiving is doing is stomping down that pride from rising up or having the opportunity to take root. And so as I give thanks, I really see how that is just like a force against this pride. No, you will not rise. It's we sometimes think it's part-proof. No pride, you're not going to rise. Well, that's what Thanksgiving does without any of that human effort. God's divine nature actually presses that pride down. And that's what I really see in the Thanksgiving, and that's why I believe he tells us to give thanks. It isn't that he needs to be thanked, but it suppresses the pride in us, which actually puts us in that position again closer to him.